Strand, and I am your, I'll start over. Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Sally Nostrand and I'm your neighborhood watch coordinator here at Las Palmas Grand. And I'm very pleased to introduce to you Amy Burnett. And we also have a professional Zoom meeting facilitator managing the recording of this meeting. She'll have everyone on mute now until after the presentation, and Amy will accept questions and answers at the end of the presentation, which will be about roughly at least 45 minutes. And we'll give you all instructions about how to submit questions directly to Amy. Amy has worked in wildlife education for the past 25 years as the current spokeswoman for Arizona Game and Fish in the Mesa region. She serves as the media's interpreter when wildlife and people collide, as they have here. Prior to Arizona Game and Fish, Amy worked as a ranger in some of the country's most beautiful regional and national parks, including the Blue Ridge Parkway National Park, Pfeiffer Big Sur, Point Reyes National Seashore, and Maricopa County Regional Parks. She regularly teaches Sonoran Desert Ecology and Interpretation Theory courses for non-government organizations and public land departments valley-wide. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Studies from the University of North Carolina at Asheville. When Amy is not working to connect people with the natural world around them, you'll find her running and hiking the local mountain trails with her Australian Shepherd dog. So welcome, Amy, and I'll let you and Chris take it from here.
Thank you very much, Sally. It's great to be here. I want to thank everyone for allowing us to do this virtually during this kind of challenging time. Game and Fish has sort of put a pause on outreaches. So you were able to adapt really quickly, and Sally enabled this to happen. And my friend Chris here, a professional Zoom trainer, is assisting as well. So it is wonderful to be here. Chris is going to say a few words about Zoom, just for those of you who might not have as much experience with it. And take it away.
Sure. So welcome everybody. On behalf of Mural, thanks for joining us. We're happy to donate our Zoom for the afternoon. If you haven't used Zoom before, the controls are really simple. In the bottom left-hand corner is the mute button. I'm putting everybody on mute as you come in so you don't get any background noise and say anything accidentally on a recording that you wouldn't want recorded. So if you need to unmute yourself later on when we do the Q&A, just move your mouse around and click on the microphone in the bottom left. If you'd like to turn on your video, the video button is right beside it. You can click that to turn video on and off. And also on the bottom, here we go. I'm manually muting people as they join here. Also on the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little bubble that says chat, and you can click the chat button and type your questions in the chat so Amy can see them as she goes and make sure she gets everybody's questions at the end. I've also turned on closed captioning, so you'll be able to see that as well. Take it away, Amy.
And if you could turn off, can you turn off closed captioning for me? Because I would not like to have it because it's really hard.
I can't turn it off for you. If I do it, I turn it for everybody.
Okay. I think so far it hasn't come on, so for me. So that's a good thing for me. All right, thanks everybody for having me. As Sally said, I am Amy Burnett. I work at the Mesa office of Game and Fish, so actually right not too far from where your community is. And thank you for having me come today to talk about urban wildlife. So you may not think of yourself as living in an urban center, but urban wildlife really applies to a lot of animals that you see around the valley. And it can be any urban wildlife, just happens to be something that comes into your neighborhood, whether you live on the fringes of the valley or square in the center of Mesa or on the fringe of Mesa. And of course, urban wildlife can be everything from deer to these cute little rabbits, which we always love to see, and then to snakes, which some of you just shuddered when you, even though your cameras are off. I'm sure that you're shuddering when I showed you a picture of a snake. So, you know, we have lots and lots of different kinds of wildlife here in Mesa and all over the Phoenix Valley. All right, so I don't know if you recognize yourself in this photo, or maybe you're somewhere in the middle, but generally I find that people are somewhere either feeding animals, just loving them to death over here on one side, or chasing them away with a hoe here because there are too many rabbits in their garden. And then there's the fence in the middle. So most of you probably land squarely on this fence. And I put this there as, you know, just a little bit of lightheartedness. But really neither one of these people are really acting in the best interest of wildlife or themselves. And we'll get into that in the presentation today. If you have any questions, just feel free to either put them in the chat or at any time. So you don't have to wait until the end to put them in the chat. And if they pop up and it applies to the slide that we're on, I can just answer it right there. Otherwise, I'll wait until the end. So a lot of you are thinking, well, you know, this is something that's happening in our community. We're seeing a lot more coyotes at Las Palmas Grande. And what can we do about it? Well, I'm going to try to explain to you today that sometimes we do things that unintentionally are actually rolling out the welcome mat. And you may not know that you're doing this, so this is a little bit why this is why I'm here, and I'll tell you how to avoid doing that in the future. All right, so obviously you can't avoid having lots of green grass in your community. When we have green grass, that attracts rabbits, and what do rabbits attract? As you can imagine, lots of predators. Yep. So just a funny story, or maybe not so funny. There were I was renting a house that had a lot of bird feeders up, and so seed bird feeders, hummingbird feeders, and was watching the backyard one day, keeping the feeders full for my my landlord. I'd like to have even though I don't usually feed birds myself. And I got this beautiful picture of a bobcat jumping down and getting a dove from underneath the bird feeder and then jumping right back out of my yard. So as I got to watch this and thought, how cool is this, getting to watch nature in action? I thought, this is not really nature. It's a little bit of an artificial construct, because I've actually encouraged this bobcat to kind of sit and wait because I put up all these bird feeders. So there's a little bit of a lesson to be learned anytime that you have animals that come into your yard. You either invite animals into your yard intentionally or unintentionally. This deer, you'll be able to see the deer when the wildlife manager actually moves off of it in just a second. He got into trouble because he was attracted into someone's backyard by food, and he got tangled up. And I apologize for the bad video. Wildlife managers are horrible videographers. Should have had Chris do this. So he got tangled up, and this wildlife manager is untangling him. I think this was a clothesline or some kind of a rope in his yard. Don't do this at home. I only recommend experts. Chris, are you able to see the slides? Let me know.
Yes, I see your slides.
Okay. I'm not sure. Peggy says that she can't see the slides in the video. So she may not be able to see all of, I'm not sure what's going on there, but maybe try adjusting how you're viewing the screens. Okay, Peter can see them. Thank you. Chris, maybe you could kind of problem solve with Peggy. Thank you so much. Awesome. So that's an example of a deer that got into trouble. Is it the deer's fault? Is it the person's fault? It's kind of in the middle. This deer was used to being in that person's yard and got into trouble. So that brings us to coyotes. So in Las Palmas Grande, you're having a lot of coyotes visiting your backyard. It's not a coincidence. There are certain things that you may be doing unintentionally to bring them there. And now that they're here, there's some things that we can do to kind of discourage them from staying, or at least staying so close to our backyards. So here are a couple of myths that I hear all the time about wildlife. I hear, the coyotes are here because we pushed them out of the desert. They're here first. Well, we're the only community having this issue, so we need to get rid of the coyotes that are here because we just have bad coyotes here. And once we get rid of them, the problem will go away once we either trap, kill, relocate them. We can just pick them up, put them somewhere else, problem goes away, no problem. And then the last myth that I hear a lot is today it's pets that are being taken and it's tomorrow it's going to be our children. There is a little bit of truth in each one of these myths, but mostly they're all things that we need to understand a little bit more about so that we can have a dialogue and we can solve the problem. So take a look at it. Here's a Google Earth map of Sonora Mountain Ranch, looking down on the desert there. Thank you so much, Chris. And if you're looking down at Sonora Mountain Ranch, they've had a really hard time with coyotes taking pets. The last number they gave me was something, this was last year, so that was 2020. And in 2019, before they contacted me, they recorded having 80 pets taken, 80. That's a lot. Now, if some of those are duplicates, that's a possibility, maybe not all of them. So, but even if it's 40, that's a lot of pets. And so when I started talking to residents, and what I found out was that they all had block walls that ran connecting the houses, and the coyotes were using the tops of the block walls as sort of like a little superhighway to navigate through the residential neighborhood, jump down, grab small pets, jump back on the wall, and keep on going. And so obviously it was something that accidentally caused a problem, and the coyotes just took advantage of it. Now, a lot of people in the community said, well, it's not really fair. You know, these coyotes were pushed out because we built this new development. But what I encourage people to think about is this is a Google map, Google Earth map. So it looks like there's a lot of development. Now look at this map. Look at that blue arrow. That's the development, and look at all of the natural Sonoran desert around. Now, what's the problem with that Sonoran desert around the community? Absolutely nothing. However, if you're a coyote, where might the food be? The easy food and the easy water. Well, we have lots and lots of water in new developments with water features, irrigation, small ponds, maybe if it's a golf course. So it's easy to see that the coyotes were like, ooh, you know, at first they were disrupted. And then after they adapted a little bit, they really liked living in Sonora Mountain Ranch. And so that's what's happening all over the valley. Yes, we interrupted them temporarily. And then once these developments are finished being built, the coyotes are actually moving in, and they're not leaving, they're staying. And that's when we start calling them urban coyotes. So we did a little experiment to, we put a little pin on the map with all the different calls that we got in 2012. Now you're wondering why. I'll explain why it's 2012 and not 2022. But in 2012, we put a little pin on the map of every time we got a coyote call in the Phoenix metro area. And this is what it looked like. The reason we don't do this anymore is we wouldn't be able to have any of the map left that wouldn't have a pin on it if we did it now. Because there are so many, now with social media, people are calling more than ever. So we get lots and lots of coyote calls. And these are just calls of people saying, hey, I saw a coyote in my yard. And why am I in downtown Phoenix and near the light rail in Tempe, and there's a coyote, and it doesn't make sense. They're lost. Well, they're not lost. They're just really smart. They're just wild dogs. And if you've ever had a dog, if you've ever looked at your dog and thought that was really smart as your dog lifts a perfectly cooked steak off the counter, well, we're dealing with really smart coyotes, because coyotes are just the smarter of the smartest dogs that are out there. You might find that coyotes are in places that you wouldn't expect them to find. This is over near the 51 in a very old historic neighborhood. And I just love the expression on her face as she's, the candid photo, as she's watching these two very well-fed, healthy coyotes walk by with her dog. And thankfully, she's got her dog on a very short leash, which is great. But as you can see, these coyotes have no problem just being so close to her. When coyotes get this close and they're used to people either feeding them or just sometimes just tolerating them being there, we call it habituation. And that's a learned response to either for, pardon me for a second, I am moving my window. It's a learned response to human feeding or indifference. So that means if your neighbor is feeding, but you're not scaring away a coyote that's coming this close to you, that's indifference, and that's considered tolerance. It's just like when you watch your dog steal the steak off the counter and you don't correct them. that's indifference. It's actually not saying anything at all is actually encouraging them. And when it comes to free food, coyotes are all over that. So we have changed the land, but we've also added some really great things like water sources, healthy populations of rabbits, things like that. And then take a look in, and I put this dog in there because it's really cute. But if you are a coyote, which one do you think is easier to see? And also which one's easier to catch? And I'm sure that you all know the answer to that question because you have a lot of you have small dogs in your community and you're wondering how you can protect them from coyotes. When you call Game and Fish, I'm sorry to say that we will not come and take a coyote out of your community that is predating on small pets. And that's because eating small pets is a natural feeding behavior of coyotes because your small dog is about the same size as a jackrabbit, which is what coyotes love to eat. Coyotes in the wild will actually take small deer, so fawns, if they are given the opportunity and mama deer isn't around. So if a coyote can take a fawn, it can surely take your Shih Tzu or your Chihuahua or your poodle, and they won't hesitate if there's no risk involved. So that's where you come in. We could take away all of these coyotes and new coyotes would come back and fill that void. We will give you some phone numbers to call of people who can, for a fee, trap coyotes and remove them. But the reason we don't do it is because we know, and as hard as it is to hear, we know that moving coyotes is not actually the solution. If the food resources are still there, if people feeding, either unintentionally or intentionally, the coyotes, if that problem is still there, more coyotes will soon come into your neighborhood. Plus, coyotes live a long time. And those coyotes that have been in your neighborhood are probably passing on the learned behavior to their progeny. So this is really something that we put on to the communities and we are here to support you. That means I don't care how many times you want to call me up on my cell phone, I turn it off at night. But if you want to call me and talk about coyote behavior and talk about what to do about solutions about predation on pets in your community, I am happy to talk to you about it and give you some solutions. So here are some solutions that you can pass on to your neighbors that might not be on this presentation today. And we can also chat over the phone, but these are some short-term things that you can do. First, protect your pets by not allowing them to free range. This is the Sonoran Mountain Ranch community that I told you about. One resident actually went as far as to hire someone to build this beautiful enclosure, I like to call it exclosure, to exclude coyotes, and it cost them $3,000. It goes, that's a really extreme case, but if in the short term we start protecting our pets, guess what happens? The coyotes learn that there's no more food and they go away. So with any luck, the community gets a hold of the problem by not allowing pets to free roam, and then the coyotes, not getting that free food anymore will slowly disappear, but it takes some time. Everyone should have, it looks really funny, but everyone should have a can of pennies that they keep by their door, their sliding glass door, if that's where you see coyotes most often, if you see one in your yard. If you have a couple pennies in a can, pardon me, and you shake that, it makes a horrible noise. I'm not going to do it on the Zoom because it would wake my dog up and I don't want her to bark. And it really drives those coyotes crazy. It scares them and they'll just jump over your fence. Now, those are non-habituated, non-urban coyotes. For ones that are really habituated, it might take a little bit more effort. And so that'll be my next slide. So you can also yell, make loud noises with pots and pans. I know you're not carrying those on a walk, but you could carry a whistle or a little horn with you. Anything to make a lot of noise. You could even pick up a rock and throw it near the coyote if you see one on a walk. All right, this is for you. I'm looking at you guys and gals, because this is the serious stuff. A super soaker. Yes, I know it sounds like a funny solution. This gadget right here is the solution to your worries. And if everyone, not everyone would need to, but it only takes a few people in a community to get one of these really fun super soakers that you can get pretty cheaply, and fill it with a 10% ammonia solution, with 10% ammonia and the rest water. And once you shoot it at a coyote that's getting too close, you get them in the kisser with it. It won't damage them. It won't hurt them, even if you get it in their eyes, because it's such a weak solution. Everybody who hasn't tried this says, I can't figure out why coyotes won't leave. And everyone who has tried this, we never hear back from them because it works. So if you're one of these people that says, Alyssa, that sounds like a ridiculous, excuse me, that sounds like a ridiculous answer to this ridiculous solution. If you say that, then yes, you are right. And it will not work if you do not buy it. So give it a shot, because those are the people who don't call me back. Pardon me. Excuse me. So what are you attracting dogs with? Is it, excuse me, it may be food, but it may be your pet. It may be the water in that person's yard. Pardon me. This cute little Yorkie right here is Ella. And excuse me, I don't actually put Ella in all that many PowerPoints, but I decided to put her in this one today because I know that in your community you've had pets taken. I got this in my email, and in the email I got this cute picture of Ella, and I also got this awful picture. And I'm including this because I want to, because it's showing you how important this issue is, and how important it is that the community comes together and understands what's happening. This was the last that before the coyote took Ella, or I'm sorry, this is what they sent me after Ella was taken by a coyote, and they never got to see her again. So this is it's a serious issue in our community, and we want to help you to solve it by keeping your pets on a leash and not letting them use a dog door, especially if they're the size of Ella. They shouldn't have free roam in the backyard. Now, some people are looking at this picture and going, well, who is going to be silly enough to feed a coyote? And I will tell you, a lot of people feed coyotes, and some of them are doing it on purpose, and some of them are just feeding their dogs outside, or maybe they're feeding the stray cats. And in Mesa, we have a lot of stray cats and that people are taking care of. There's nothing wrong with taking care of stray cats as long as you remove the food at night, because that's when the coyotes will come through cruising. They know where all the food is, and they're going to take advantage of that. So if you see someone who is putting out food for coyotes, don't tolerate it. You really should report it. It's actually a violation, and people can be fined for it. Now, some of you are saying right now, I'm never going to report someone because I don't want to get my neighbor a fine. Well, they won't get a fine the first time. They will get a warning, and if they continue to do it, that's when they could get cited by a wildlife manager. But first, they'll get a nice knock on the door, or in this case, this time, right now, they'll probably get a phone call or a letter that says, please don't feed the wildlife, and here's why. So this is the law that they're breaking by feeding wildlife in Maricopa County, and any county that's has a population greater than 280,000. So that's all of Maricopa County, Pima County, Pinal County. Long-term, how can you make a difference? Just simple things: keeping your garbage secure with a bungee cord, not putting your, if you have javelinas in your neighborhood, it's really important to make sure to not put the garbage out until the morning of rather than night before. Simple things like picking up fallen citrus. Coyotes love to eat fallen fruit on the ground. So picking it when it's ripe and then taking care of it when it's fallen on the ground. And that will also help with roof rat problems and other vermin as well. So it's a win-win situation when you do that. If you have a leak, really good idea to fix it, because a coyote might be stopping by every night to get a drink from that leaky hose. And also rattlesnakes are attracted to that too. So, you know, a lot of these things that I'm telling you today have other benefits besides just getting discouraging coyotes. So here is our phone number. You don't have to write it down now. You can just look up Operation Game Thief on Google and it just pops out right up with our number. I tell people, I really discourage people from telling their neighbor, hey, I'm going to report you if you don't stop that, because then when you do report them, they know who did it. So leave it up to the wildlife managers. They will send a nice note first and warn them and give them an opportunity to not do it again. You remain anonymous and you report them. And then you really are protecting your community when you do that. We've had some javelina bites. I live here in Fountain Hills, and we've had 2 javelina bites on, and in both of those cases, a person was bitten, and we traced the behavior of those javelinas back to someone who was actually feeding javelina on that street where the person was bitten in both cases. So it's really important, if you know of someone who's feeding wildlife, to get them to stop. And you can go on to urban wildlife or put in the keywords urban wildlife in order to get more information. And we have some pamphlets online as well. It really starts with your community taking action and getting involved and wanting to make a change in order to keep coyotes at a really safe distance, to keep them from getting your pets, and just to keep them at a nice distance so that we can all live with wildlife. And you know, that's a lot of the reason why we moved here. Okay, it's the weather too, especially this time of year. But a lot of us, myself included, because obviously I got into this job because I love wildlife, but we want to see wildlife as it's in its wild state and not habituated in an urban. So keeping wildlife at a distance actually starts with us, and there's things that we can do. And hopefully I've given you some tips today that you can pass on and internalize in your family and in your community, and talk about over the water cooler and at the pool. And now you know what to do and what not to do. Don't pat the rattlesnakes, please. And this is my phone number if you'd like to call with questions. If there's something that you didn't want to talk about here, feel free to give me a call or a text on my cell. But otherwise, I'm going to open it up to questions. But first, I want to say thank you so much for spending the time with me to listen. I know there was a lot of information in this presentation. And I just thank you for being here and being willing to hear it. All right, so if anybody has questions, feel free to unmute yourself, or you can write things in the chat. And if you unmute yourself, I just ask that you mute yourself again once you're finished asking the question, and try not to run over each other. I know it's kind of hard to tell when someone else is talking. But yes, I am ready for questions.
I've got one.
Okay, go ahead.
There are a lot of people that I've read that feral cats kill a lot of birds, and maybe it's not such a good idea to feed cats, but then that probably isn't one of your goals, just a thought.
And that's a good, and it is a very excellent point. My job is not to tell people how to deal with their domestic animals, only to deal with wildlife. But I really do encourage people not to leave out food for cats. So if obviously cats are a huge predator of birds, and that's something that your community can say, can get together and say, hey, let's not encourage stray cats to hang around, because then we lose our wildlife. But that would be a community issue that you could work with your HOA on for sure. But
Hey, Amy. This is Todd Lutz. I'm the vice president of the company that owns the community here.
Oh, great.
We do Four Corners inspections. We do them every quarter, as well as we do meter reads every month by our maintenance team. I can tell you that is a big concern for us, is that people do leave fruit on the ground. They leave food out for pets or stray animals. So that, just to Stan's point, that is something that is of a concern for at least management standpoint. We do have, at Las Palmas Grand, one of the things that people buy here for is the resort style, and a lot of that is a lot of green grass, and unfortunately bunnies are a part of that. We noticed with all the rains this last year and the foliage growth, we've seen an incredible amount of rabbits here, and so therefore it's not surprising that coyotes have moved in. I can tell you, I've been here since '94. We've got 5 properties in the area, and we've had this situation happen at all 5 of them. And so, your point's well taken. We've trapped before, removed both javelina and coyotes, only to see others move in their place. And so your point is well taken on that. I think it's important that, like you say, we all get together and come up with a plan for, people to understand living with wildlife, as well as the things that we can do to at least minimize that with feeding fruit on the ground. The rabbits, I don't know what to do with other than start killing the grass. But again, like any community with 1,500 residents, you're going to get people on all sides of the fence. I know when we trapped before, we got a lot of complaints about how cruel we were, and so it was a really kind of a no-win situation for us. And so I really appreciate you today, because you bring up a lot of good points.
Sure. Thanks for saying that, Todd, and kind of reinforcing what my presentation is all about. And it sounds like you and I and most of the people on, I imagine maybe everybody on this presentation Zoom are thinking, we love wildlife, we don't want to harm them. What can we do for the best of wildlife and for our community as well? And so it sounds like you have a really balanced community there. And there are a couple of outliers that are probably not on this call that are doing things like feeding the animals. So it starts here with a presentation like this. And Sally, I can do another presentation at a later date, in a couple of months. You never get everybody. It's almost like preaching to the choir. So I rely a lot on everybody who's watching this right now to go and talk to their neighbors about it. So Todd, what you can do is, as the president, is put out, a very big important memo to the residents and say, this is our stance. We're not going to tolerate leaving food out for animals at night. If you do that, you can be reported and you could be cited. But it would be on the risk. You can do it both one of 2 ways. You can either, as a community, decide to cite them, and then it would be on the association, of course. But you could also, if you have a name and a phone number, a name and an address, you could also report those people to Game and Fish's Operation Game Thief. And if that happens, they get an official letter and they understand that they are actually breaking the law. So you can report them and you don't have to deal with them. Sometimes it has more, you might not feel like if they're reported, it might not have enough teeth in it. So, and keep in mind that it would always, it sounds a little bit harsh, but they're not going to get fined the first time they do it, only if it's a repeated offense.
Hey, Amy.
I hope that helps. Yes.
I was going to say, I noticed you mentioned that they when they cruise around at night, but the coyotes in here cruise around during the day, and they become very, very comfortable in here. And I know that Todd and I even talked about it. And to me, that's the issue now, is the ones that are here are really, really comfortable. And I think we all do need to come together and know how to deal with the fact that they're here and how to discourage them from being like in the yards and just kind of roaming around. But what happens when they become so comfortable? Can you train them not to be anymore and leave, or is it like these coyotes have to go and then we need to start fresh? I mean, how do we deal with that?
So the old adage, you can't train a dog new tricks, is a lie. I was actually talking with Sally and Chris earlier about, I have a brand new dog. She's 14 months old, and I'm training her as if she's 14 weeks old, and she's doing great. It takes a lot longer, but these coyotes are absolutely trainable. You get those super soakers out there, you get your can of pennies, and you haze them. So the word haze, just like when you're, it's just like back in college days, right? You're going through hazing. These coyotes need to be hazed because they need to be taught to have the natural fear of people that they lost when we trained them that was okay to come into our communities and eat our pets and take advantage of the free food that we have. So we actually sort of left the steak on the table for the dog to eat and walked away. Now, not only are we going to have to correct the wild dogs from eating the steak, but it's going to be a little bit harder, and we have to get our neighbors to do it too. Oh, and Todd was saying about the rabbits. The rabbits may be an attractant, but they're not going to be, it doesn't translate from you have a lot of rabbits to you have coyotes eating your pets. You have a lot of rabbits, and then you have a lot of coyotes cruising through your community, but they're only coming in close because they haven't had any bad experiences with the residents. So the residents, excuse me, the residents now need to get out there and be a little bit proactive, and that's the hard part. You know, if you imagine we're sitting around a table 200 years ago, and we are all trying to protect our property from coyotes that are taking our sheep because we're ranchers. What would we do? Would we remove the coyotes? No, we'd probably shoot them with guns because that's what they did 200 years ago. So we don't have to go to that extreme measures now. We're a little bit more civilized. We know that we can haze them through means other than going to that extreme measure. So the super soakers that get that horrible smell on their fur, really effective. Making loud noises, really effective. One time, the only thing I had near me was a water bottle when I had a huge javelina in my front yard eating my cactus. So I took that water bottle that I had and I threw it up into the air really high, and it came down on the cement with this is satisfying thud, and it made this horrible noise. And I aimed it right like 10 feet in front of the javelina. Well, that javelina thought that, there was a meteor that landed in front of it. It just sort of took off and just started running it. And I have not seen it since. So there are ways, it sounds a little ridiculous, but you can throw things near, and obviously don't hit them. But you'll find that once you actually start sort of fighting back, these coyotes will respond. I have literally run down the street at a coyote yelling, and my neighbors have laughed at me, but then they learned that, oh, we don't have coyotes on our street anymore. So even though a coyote may seem bold to you, making yourself big by, putting your hands up and yelling in low tones, and clapping, and then maybe even carrying something with you like a whistle when you are walking dogs. All of these things are going to discourage those coyotes from coming in close. And what's great about that is you'll still have coyotes, you'll still see them in your community, but they won't be coming up so close to your yard once you start hazing them.
Yeah, the worst
Amy,
part for us is when the fight broke out outside our back. They sound like their coyotes were fighting with each other or something. We have no idea. We just heard this awful yelling, and it was horrible. So we opened up the slider door, banging stuff out. At first they didn't take off, but they finally did. But the worst part was not only did it upset us, it upset our dog. Then our dog doesn't want to go outside later, even to go to the bathroom. It was horrible. And that's, to me, the worst thing is, I don't live here to have it shaken like this. You know what I mean? If they're here minding their own business is one thing, but if they're laying down in the middle of the street, just, hey, I'm going to lay here for a while, enjoy the sun. No, you're not here. That's what I like.
Yep. And what's happening is that when we see a coyote laying in the middle of the street, what do? We usually take out our cell phones and take a video, and we don't say a word. And that's exactly the wrong thing to do. You can take a video, but you should be yelling at the coyote while you're taking that video and scaring them off.
Right.
You'd be surprised. Take a few steps towards them with your hands up and shouting in low tones at them. And that's important. It's important that you don't say, hey, get out of here. Hey, scram. You have to get your baritone voice going and really yell at them. And they will, they'll be like, oh, and they'll run down the street. It's
Amy.
really important.
Amy, my name's
Yes.
Peggy Marcone.
Hey,
I'm
Peggy.
the, president of the Residents Association here. And I just wanted to say I've been going through minutes from past meetings over the many years, like 20 years. And I have found several times where it's been brought up, the coyote issue. So I mean, it's nothing new. There are people that think this is brand new because of the construction going on south of here. But I also, there's been a couple comments on a Facebook page and also in the notes here about buying a pellet gun or a pistol and going after them with a pellet gun or a pistol. And I'm just wondering if you could address that.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Peggy. So a pellet gun or pistol is really overkill in this situation. It might feel really overwhelming at first, but these measures, like using a super soaker to haze them, to yelling and, making all the things that we talked about to haze these, the animals, all of these things really do work, but you have to be consistent. Those actually work more effectively than a pellet gun, because a pellet gun, you have to, number one, you have to hit the animal, and it's not going to be a lasting effect like having ammonia smell on your fur. Coyotes have such a sensitive sense of smell. Have you ever hugged someone and they have a horrible perfume and you can't get it out of your, off of your clothes all day and you smell that perfume? Yes, Chris is nodding. I'm seeing people are nodding. Imagine if you had the sense of smell of a dog, a wild dog, a coyote. That smell of that ammonia stays on all day and you don't get to take a shower because you're a coyote in the desert. And it really is lasting and it makes an impression on their brain. So it's not going to happen overnight, but these measures that Game and Fish recommends actually work better than pellet guns that just sting for an instance and they might just flinch and not realize and not make the connection. So it's important that they make the connection between people and the discomfort. And so in this case, we don't actually recommend pellet guns. They're dangerous, and firearms in a community, you can be cited for those by your local law enforcement. So no need to get in trouble, and just really bring things that make noise and then smell really bad. I'm going to take some of the questions in the chat because people have been waiting patiently. Sally brought up the 24/7 wildlife number. And Sally, do you have that on you? Because I just turned my phone off so that it didn't disturb me. Maybe you could put that in the chat. Okay, great. Sally's going to put that in the chat. It is a 623 number. It's a local number and it's 24/7. That is our radio room dispatch number. That number will get you, someone who's going to pick up that phone at any time of day. So what is that? What is it used for? It's used if you have an aggressive coyote that's showing aggression towards people, give that number a call. We want to know about any coyotes that are showing aggression towards people. If it's a coyote that's coming towards you and is sort of walking towards you, and it's not stalking you, it's just walking a little bit too bravely towards you, that's not necessarily reason to call. But if you are afraid, if you're worried, if you want to talk to someone about it, you can feel free to call that number. So if you have questions, if you have serious concerns about a coyote, by all means call. We'd rather hear about a coyote that's questionable, has some questionable behavior, so that we can monitor it, because you might be the third person that's called from your community, and it's not always on social media. So our dispatch center compiles those reports. I actually get the emails, and if I see 2 or 3 phone calls from that same exact area, I'll do little pinpoints on the map, and I'll talk to our urban wildlife specialist, like, okay, what are we going to do about this? But even better than that, a wildlife manager will actually follow up with each call, especially if it's a serious matter. But the people on the other end of the phone, they're very knowledgeable, highly trained in wildlife conflicts. We hear about everything from people who, have a fox running across their yard and it's never happened before, to people who have, have been bitten, someone who has a child who's been bitten by a coyote, to someone who, is attacked by a bear in a campground. So we've seen it and heard it all. That's a good number to keep in your phone if you have any questions and concerns about aggressive wildlife. Let's see. We've experienced the same thing since early 90s. No, that was Todd. We talked about that. Talked about the 24/7. Yes. Excuse me. Galaxy Tab. I know that's not your real name. The Super Soaker is absolutely great for javelina too, and it's great for bobcats. All of those mammals and javelinas have a great sense of smell. They hate Super Soakers, and javelinas have a really bad sense of sight, but a great sense of smell. When you find a javelina in your community, when you see one up close, it's very important to make a lot of noise so the javelina knows you're there and knows where you are, because if you sneak up on one, they can actually run in the wrong direction and run at you. And we've had some wildlife biologists that have been knocked over by javelinas. They didn't know which way to run, and the javelinas panicked and ran into them, and it was kind of funny. But not too funny if it happens to you, right? Only when it happens to wildlife managers. And then you try to get it on video, but you never get it on video. So yes, I talked about that. Your Marilee talks about wolf urine granules on the perimeter of your yard. Excuse me. Anything that's like urine scent or mountain lion scent, it may possibly work for a day, and that's possibly. We don't recommend it because it's really ineffective. Wild animals are not fooled. They are, it's survival of the fittest. If you're not a very smart wild animal, you're not going to make it. The generations of wildlife that are in your yard, these urban coyotes have been there for years. They know the difference between day-old wolf urine and some of them might not even have come across a wolf, but they might just pee right on top of that to mark their territory over the wolf urine, and then the next day it's faded, and you'd have to reply it every day, and it's not effective.
I have a funny story about that, Amy. I have a funny story about the wolf urine. I got the granules because I heard it could be so stinky if you did the actual urine. So the first night we put the wolf urine granules in the yard, our 5-pound Chihuahua, who's never howled in her life, went out and howled.
Oh, that's so funny. I love it. She was, yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
it worked for her. So cutting, should we cut up our shrubs up to 2 to 3 inches above the ground? I recommend trimming your shrubs above the 2 to 3 inches above the ground, because anytime you have shrubs that go to the ground, that's home for snakes. So you're actually making a habitat for snakes by especially lantana. So if someone were to ask me, how can I invite snakes into my yard? I love snakes. I want to have more of them. I'd say plant lantana. That is where, so I also sometimes remove rattlesnakes from people's yards as a side job for fun on the weekends. And I most of the time find them under lantana. So I would say like 8 out of 10 times the snake is underneath the lantana. So anytime you have vegetation that's touching the ground, you're helping to hide wildlife. So definitely have those, have your landscapers trim it up. You definitely want to be able to see underneath bushes. Oh, so Sally just put the number on there. It's in the chat right now for the for our 24/7 dispatch. Now, if you just have general questions about coyotes, javelinas, feel free to call the main number and you'll talk to someone who's really knowledgeable as well. This number is only for, I've got a coyote that's doing something really strange in my yard. I think it's sick, or it's attacked a person, or an animal, and we record those. We record those things, and I get the emails. Mike is there we go. Mike is talking about seeing wild coyotes in his yard, and I agree. Excuse me. And we talked about pistols and cap guns and things like that. Anything that just, if you want to have something that's a little bit more, shall we say, not as huge as a huge super soaker, you can always carry, excuse me, bear mace or pepper spray to if you're worried about an animal that's coming that close. But of course, it's not going to really make a noise. You want something that's going to make a lot of noise. Yeah, Stan, you're absolutely right. It's illegal to discharge a firearm in the city of Mesa. Okay, so that's all the chat questions. What other questions do you have? Anybody in the room here?
Well, I don't have a question, but I do have maybe a different perspective.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
We've been here 18 months is all. And the very first day we were here, having our very first dinner in our little kitchen, a coyote walked about 3 feet in front of our kitchen window. 18 months later, we've seen 2 coyotes, or a couple of weeks ago when all this kind of started up. Meanwhile, as Stephen Colbert would say, I do a lot of walking, about 4 miles when I walk within the community here, whenever I go on a walk. I've probably had 6 dogs come after me during those walks. Little dogs, I love dogs, so it's not a big deal to me. Probably 3 of those times, there was no human around immediately. Add to that, probably another 3 dozen times when I've seen dogs off leash. So from my perspective, I'm much more likely, hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times, more likely to be injured by a dog in this community than I would be a coyote. And here again, when I've had dogs my entire life. I've trained dogs for field trials and hunting tests and obedience trials. My dogs, when they're on leash, and we don't have a dog right now, unfortunately, when they're on leash, their head bobbles off my knee. I've always had big dogs, so their head would bobble off my knee as opposed to a little dog where it might bobble off my ankle. I see people here all the time with these flexi leads or whatever they're called, and they're way behind the owner or they're way in front of the owner. And, like you say, coyotes are pretty smart. And they're probably pretty quick. I've never really, had much tested their speed. So I think, here again, some of the things you talked about, we need to keep our dogs under control, keep them close by, not let them be unattended, because they're simply, an easy catch, easier than a rabbit, I'm sure, for a coyote.
I appreciate that, Martin. It's a good reminder that if we, having dogs off leash in a tight-knit community where there are a lot of dogs off leash in an area is basically like is a KFC with a free open sign with all the windows open where you can smell that great fried chicken. So the more dogs we have off leash, the more attractants there are for coyotes. So and it's just a lose-lose situation. The more pets that get taken that are off leash, the more the coyotes have success, and the more they will actually attempt to take dogs that are even on leash. So it's really a losing situation for the whole community if people have dogs that aren't on the leashes. And the retractable leashes that you bring up, Martin, they are very dangerous because when they go really fast and someone tries to grab the leash as it's going out, it can actually make a really serious cut that and almost slice your fingers off. When that goes, those are actually pretty dangerous. I've seen some really nasty burns from when people have gotten them wrapped around their legs when their dog is trying to escape a coyote, and you're not able to control your dog. And we have heard that even specifically in this community, we had Sally was telling me that there was someone that had a dog taken off that was on a leash. So that just tells me that the coyotes in the community are just people like to say that they're bold. I like to say that they're tolerated by the community and they're encouraged to do what they're doing. You may not think that you're encouraging them, but by tolerating it, you're actually encouraging them to prey on dogs. So a little bit of a different mindset shift for everybody. And that's the easiest, and it's a really simple way to do it, but it requires everybody to get on board and on the same page.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate this so much.
You're so welcome.
Very, very educational, and I think maybe what we do, Peggy, is we get maybe a group or a community meeting we can set up in the ballroom. Maybe we could talk more about this and educate people. Just kind of parlay what Amy had to say.
Definitely, definitely.
And, maybe putting something out on a Facebook post would be great. Maybe hanging a flyer in the community center where people will see it. Just some information, or sending a little blurb out in a newsletter. I can send an article that I wrote about urban wildlife. Sally, just shoot me an email, remind me, and I'll send you an article that I wrote about what communities can do. And just, the more people we can reach, the better. And it's going to take a little while. It's not going to happen overnight. But that is really the best way to discourage coyotes from predating on your pets, but still keeping them in the community where we can watch them. Stanley, did I get your comment? We talked about firearms. I think I got his comment.
Yeah, the last thing we want is bullets flying around in here.
Yeah, I agree.
I was 100% pro relocate when this all first started, but over the days and weeks, I'm not pro relocate at all anymore. I know Mike will like Todd. Will like to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, Stan, we're not opposed to it. I certainly, I think there was an individual that had talked about bringing traps in and doing it, but again, I've been doing this since '94, and we've tried different things. I grew up in the country. I've lived in Toronto, Boston, Los Angeles. Everywhere I've lived, I've encountered coyotes, and I'm talking in the city. So I think it's like Amy says, we just have to learn to live with them and know the proper things to do to make them go somewhere where they don't want to be here. Make it tougher for them to not be here. And so this has been great. And I think what we do from here, Stan, is we maybe just get together and try to inform people on the things that we can do, because again, I've seen it where people are basically feeding these guys. And shoot, if I was hungry, I'd stick around too.
Yeah, once you start looking at it that way, what are we doing that's keeping them there? And you realize that we are both the problem and also the solution. But it's going to take everybody working together. One person feeding cats on the side can ruin it for everybody. Almost like, the kid's going to go to mom when dad is too strict and try to get away with it. And it's the same thing that's happening in our community.
Yeah.
With wildlife.
I have one other question, Amy.
Sure, Peggy.
It was mentioned that coyotes can smell where their prey is by, like you're saying, the small dogs. Are dog droppings, when people don't clean up after their dog, is that something that will notify a coyote that there's food in the area?
I'm not sure that would really make that much of a difference, because they're more interested in smelling that the dog was there 2 minutes ago and following the scent rather than smelling the droppings.
Okay. Good.
But dog droppings, ironically, actually, I have a friend that has a rattlesnake relocation business. And he's found that in places where there are a lot of dog droppings, there's actually a lot more rattlesnakes, because rats are attracted to the droppings because they actually eat the leftover food in the droppings. So then so keeping your dog poop cleaned up will actually prevent rattlesnakes, which is something you can use. You can say you heard it first here. Sounds a little strange, but it's true.
Hey, Amy.
Yes.
I want to thank you for the presentation. And I'm probably one of them that was for relocation if we can't educate ourselves. And that's to me is the issue, because a lot of us are really comfortable with them here. I mean, really comfortable with, oh, look how pretty, you know, instead of chasing them away and stuff. So, and I also wanted to say to Todd that I'd love to work with you on information or whatever, and meetings, whatever you want to do. I'm here to help.
No, Peggy, you're on my A list.
All
So,
right.
Yeah,
Love it.
You're on the
yeah.
board's A list too.
yeah.
No, thank you for that. I appreciate it. One other thing, one other case against relocation is that coyotes have, I took this out because of time, but since we brought it up here, we're talking a little bit about relocation. It's important. In coyote social structure, you have got an alpha male and an alpha female, and the alpha female pretty much runs the pack. Urban coyotes don't necessarily have a pack. They usually, the dynamics are all messed up when it comes to urban coyotes, so it's not exactly the same. But in wild coyotes that are roaming around in a pack, the pack splits up during hunting times and then kind of comes back together at certain points. So you may not realize that there's a pack. So in your neighborhood, you probably have a pack. A pack is just related coyotes. It's mom, dad, pups that haven't split up to form their own family groups yet. That's all a pack is. However, this is important because if you hire a trapper and they trap the alpha female and take it away, now all of a sudden, all of the beta females now all of a sudden go into heat. So instead of having 8 pups in a season, you're going to have 32 pups in a season, because now you've changed the social dynamics, and the pheromones that are put off by that alpha female leaving will actually causes those females to, the beta females, to go into almost, all together go into heat. So that's why when in the olden days, when they used to shoot as many coyotes as they could, it never worked, because the more coyotes you shoot, if you shoot the alpha female, all the other ones go into heat, whereas the alpha female keeps the other ones from going into heat by just being there. It's just a very strange biological phenomenon. So trapping can actually make your problem worse, because you're not going to be able to ever get rid of all of the coyotes, and you might actually make your problem worse. So yeah, Randy brings up the stray cats roaming, and that's another reason to not feed the stray cats, because anytime a coyote is successful, he brings up that a stray cat was killed in a neighbor's yard. Anytime that a coyote has a successful kill of a stray cat, that's a memory. They're going to try to do it again, and so they're looking for more cats or more small prey like dogs. So it just behooves everybody to get on the same page about cats. I love all animals, but I do believe that it'd be great to keep all cats inside. That's just my opinion. But if you're looking at it from a community standpoint, it would be better if we didn't have stray cats that are roaming around, because they're really easy prey for coyotes. And they are an attractant. If anybody has, I think Arliss has a question. Can you unmute yourself? No. Oh, you're just talking. I'm not sure if you're asking a question or.
Oh, I just think people should use common sense.
Oh, can you unmute her, Chris?
I can't unmute her. I can ask her to unmute.
Okay. Arliss, can you unmute yourself? There we go.
I have trained 5 dogs.
Okay.
And all of them on a short lead. Don't use these retractable things. You can't control your dog.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
just common sense.
Yep, common sense. Some of the things I talked about today were something that things that you might not have known, but all of it, yeah, most of it is actually just common sense. But it's about getting us all on the same page. If we start talking as a community, having a dialogue, it's really important, because not everybody is realizing what's going on. Oh, thank you so much, Joan, for saying that. That was nice.
I will walk every morning between 6 and 7. In all the years I've been there, I have yet to see a coyote or a javelina.
Oh, really? Okay. So I think, it might be in just certain parts of the community, in Fountain
Well, they
Hills.
run 2 doors up for me, but I never see them.
In Fountain Hills, it was literally one street that was having a problem with javelinas because someone was feeding them. So it can be very localized. Someone 2 streets over from you could have a lot and you may have none.
I've none. I've only seen one by my house in 20 years.
See, that tells me
That was
that the
one
people on your street are probably not feeding them. So they're using their common sense. Appreciate that.
I hope.
I think I got everybody in the chat. Okay. I want to wish everybody a great rest of your Wednesday, halfway through the week. Oh, some of you were tired, so it doesn't even matter, right? Every day is a weekend for you. But I know that your time is valuable. I really appreciate you spending the time with me today. I feel that this information is important because if it saves even one dog's life, is worth it. Any chance you get, share what we learned today. I will say goodbye to you and keep Sally and Chris on so I can say goodbye to them. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. And we're going to be posting the link of the recording to this meeting on Facebook and YouTube as soon as possible in the next day or so. Thank you, everyone.